London is full of hundreds and hundreds of theatres, both small and large-scale theatres. There is so much theatre being made over here, both classics from all around the world and modern contemporary plays. There's festivals of Latin American theatre, French theatre, and plays brought from all around the world. The West End is the sort of centre of some of the biggest shows out there, both musicals and plays with some of the most fantastic actors coming over from all over the world to perform here. It's an exciting place to come and see theatre. And see some of the best theatre that the world can offer. Hello, my name is Lucy Phelps. I'm with the Royal Shakespeare Company, and today we will be talking about Measure for Measure.
Out of the blue, the Duke of Vienna decides to leave the city, putting his dukedom in the hands of his deputy, Angelo. He gives Angelo his absolute moral authority, including the power of life and death over his subjects. The puritanical Angelo immediately starts to clean up Vienna, pulling down all the brothels and reinstituting laws against promiscuity, including the death sentence for sex outside marriage. The first to be arrested is young Claudio, whose girlfriend Juliet is pregnant with their child. As he's dragged to prison, he begs his friend to go to his sister, Isabella, to ask her to intervene on his behalf. Isabella is about to take holy orders as a nun and enter a convent. Nevertheless, she's persuaded to go to Angelo and appeal to him. Angelo initially refuses her pleas to lift the death sentence on poor Claudio. However, he finds himself moved by the vehemence of her argument and realizes that he's attracted by both her modesty and her beauty. And he proposes that he will indeed save her brother's life, but only on condition that she sleeps with him. Isabella is horrified and threatens to expose him. He tells her nobody would believe her, and she turns to us and asks, "To whom shall I complain?" How can she sacrifice her virginity and her immortal soul to redeem her brother? And what guarantee does she have that Angelo will keep his word if she were to relent? The Duke, meanwhile, disguised as a friar, has remained in Vienna to spy secretly on his deputy and see how he uses or abuses his new power. He has himself secretly placed in the prison to overhear Isabella tell her brother of Angelo's proposal. With the clock ticking towards the proposed execution, the Duke has a dangerous plan to resolve the situation, save Claudio's life and her virginity, and ultimately expose the hypocrisy of his sainted deputy. But to find out what that is, you'll have to come and see the play.
I always find that I'm not very good at concise plot doing, so I won't actually start on that. I think I would step back and say more, it's a play about power, about who holds power, about justice, what is the perfect idea of justice, who is the arbiter of justice. It also has sort of resonates with contemporary themes, I think along the lines of the Me Too movement at the moment, the abuse of power, particularly against women. So I think it's a very pertinent play for our current times. And it's also about the conflicts of familial love and duty and vocation and female autonomy and choice.
I think absolutely. I think it's. I mean, this whole season that the RSC have put together here was in some part a response to #MeToo, and I think Taming of the Shrew, Measure for Measure, they both of them really speak to these issues of power, who has power and what they do with it. And how that affects sex, particularly. And A Measure for Measure is the classic one. There's Shakespeare in between these two plays as a playwright and as a person really grows up. So in Taming of the Shrew, he presents Catherine, who is a difficult woman in the original, who won't accept her place, but can't really think of an alternative to getting married. With Isabella in Measure for Measure, this is 15 years later when he writes Measure for Measure, she has an alternative. You know, she has a job. She wants to be a nun. She's already on her path, and men keep pulling her off her path, so she can't get where she wants to go because the world keeps blocking her, and she keeps being presented with these awful, awful choices. So I think that speaks to us now. It's not. You know, I live in a very privileged part of the world as a woman, and I know that these limited choices are the norm for a lot of women on earth still, and even in somewhere as glamorous and as amazing as Los Angeles, women are being asked to make choices all the time that compromise them fundamentally.
I guess Measure for Measure more broadly, each of the characters within it is kind of dealing with their own kind of shame and how they can force their way through that, and it's all about different levels of presentation.
Isabella is on a journey to become a nun, so she's a novice when we meet her at the beginning of the play. I see her as a woman who has chosen to do this because she is deeply religious. It's also a society where women are not afforded many positions in society. Their options are very limited. And I would say that both in Shakespeare's time and in the time that we set the play, the church was a place where you could develop your mind and your skill set. You didn't have to be boxed in as a wife or a lady of the night, so to speak. I would actually say that personally I see it as that she has everything to live for at the start of the play. She's actually free within the church. I know other people might disagree with me, that's how I see it, and I believe that over the course of the play, through her experiences and her attempts to save her brother's life, she has everything stripped away from her till she's almost erased from the play. I think at the start of the play she's extremely happy, and she has sort of her smile diminishes. I have to sort of gear myself up for the final scene because I do find it a very sad and painful scene, both for the character and as a wider idea about women being publicly humiliated, having their autonomy taken from them, having their voice stolen from them, and having no free will anymore, no choice given to them, and being manipulated. I find it, and also in the play, she's a shadow of the woman that she was at the start of the play. This woman who has such fascinating intellect and wonderful ways of debate has nothing to say at the end of the play.
Is the way I mean, there's many ways to play Angelo. So I mean, it's a in many ways it's an actor's dream. It's a lovely part to play. He goes from angel to devil in one scene. But in my opinion, I think Angelo is a devout man, but in the way that he follows the rules. He just follows the rules of how to worship God. He follows the rules of what the state says you can do or you can't do. But a man without passion, a man that you can be. Lucio describes him as he pisses snow broth. He's untouched by emotion. We have a politician in this country called Jacob Rees-Mogg, a very posh English conservative politician who has his hair slicked like that, who you can barely imagine having a lustful thought, let alone having sex. But he's got 5 kids, so clearly he does. And he's a devout Catholic, which Angelo is too. So I thought of him a lot. And I think Angelo is that man. You would never imagine, just can't imagine him having any sort of human emotion whatsoever, let alone lustful passions. As soon as he meets Isabella, he falls for her. He says for her virtue, and maybe it is, but he feels feelings that he's never had before, and so he makes the active decision to follow this passion. He can't help himself. And that leads him down a. I mean, it all comes to pieces for him really, and it ends, I think, with an intense sense of shame at the end of the piece, albeit that he is apparently still alive and he's now married to a very virtuous woman in Mariana, but he's having thought that he had killed killed Claudio and slept with Isabella, it turns out at the end of the play he's done neither of these things, but has consummated his love interest with Mariana. So he's a complicated character, but he's basically angel devil. Those two things.
So again, it's another gender flipped part. It's a part that would normally be played by a man, Aeschylus. And Aeschylus it's a slightly curious one because the production is set in 1913 in Vienna, and I researched that there were women in positions of some kind of power in public life at that time. They were sort of emerging as part of a sort of suffragette movement. So Aeschylus is kind of like a sort of magistrate, like a judge. So a legal mind. And also the deputy to the Duke. But then when the Duke chooses to test Angelo, Aeschylus is made the deputy to Angelo. So Aeschylus is simultaneously very educated, very privileged, but powerless in some ways. She can't sort of intervene, things have to play out. So I always think of Aeschylus, I don't know why I say this, and maybe this is frivolous, but as a kind of good Nazi. You know, she's the one who does what she's told. She may have mixed feelings about it, but she does what she's told, and ultimately she believes in the status quo. By the end of the play, that's very, very challenged for her, because she thought she knew what the world was, and then she finds out the world is not what she thought it was. So Aeschylus is quite a sad role. She ends up in a bit of a lost place, not really understanding the things she believed that people represented, they don't represent, I think. She's a good person, she's compassionate, but she doesn't necessarily think things should change. And because Measure for Measure is, you know, about sexual abuse, sexual exploitation, I try to tell the story that even though I'm a woman in power, I don't sympathise with women. There's a lot of women out there like that. You know, so when Isabella presents herself in the street and says, I want justice, Aeschylus just thinks, who's this silly, shrill young woman making trouble for these wonderful men who have been ruling the country so brilliantly? What's the problem? And then, of course, she finds out that they have not been running things as she thought.
I play a character, Lucio, who I guess in current terms you'd describe as a cad. So the kind of guy that maybe some men would like to have a drink with, but women wouldn't want to be left alone in a room with him. So it's very different to Catherine. I really lean into the misogyny in this. He's a kind of good time guy, but really there's a dark, dark underbelly to this character here. And I guess his shame is that he's always just slept around. He's got no money, but yet he lives in the kind of higher echelons of society. So it's a brilliant kind of thing to play. It's good fun. Well, with Lucio, the reference points, I like to use I like to try and get two extremes and then fuse them together if I can. So I looked at a lot of old black and white films from the 50s and 60s to give a kind of a more BBC, old school BBC voice. So it's very kind of, hello, how are you? And very ding dong. And I like Peter O'Toole was a big, big reference point to me. And then on the flip side of that, I was watching footage of the Glastonbury Festival, and Janelle Monáe was doing all this incredible stuff with a cane. She's kind of like a modern day female Prince, and she's doing all this incredible stuff with a cane. And I thought, I want to do that. I want to have that in the character. How can I fuse an old school kind of English gent, but with a kind of sassy funk type physicality? So as an audience, I don't think you'd pick up on that, but it's more precise in terms of how he moves around. So the cane work was very, very much based on Janelle Monáe.
I'm really excited about directing Measure for Measure because it is a play for today. Simple outline of the plot. Claudio is sentenced to death. His sister Isabella goes to Lord Angelo, the deputy, and asks for the death sentence to be lifted. He says, okay, I will cancel the death sentence as long as you have sex with me. She says, I will expose you for saying that. He says, who would believe you? She turns to us and says, to whom should I complain? #MeToo. Shakespeare sets the play in Vienna, and interestingly, the Vienna of the early 1900s seemed to be a very precise fit with the different worlds that collide in Measure for Measure. The world of the convent, the world of the brothel, the world of the court. It is the birthplace of psychoanalysis. It's the home of Sigmund Freud. In terms of art, it was the birth of the secessionist movement with artists like Klimt, and I think in particular of Egon Schiele, whose paintings even now seem bordering on the pornographic, and the forensic analysis of human sexuality in those paintings seems to me to accord very close with Shakespeare's obsessions in this play. Stephen Brimson Lewis has designed both the set and the costume. He's really run with the idea of the Vienna, both of the early 1900s and as it appears in later films, like famously in the Orson Welles' The Third Man. And there is an element of film noir about the context of the play, the story of the play, but also the play has an almost filmic sense of scenes very fast cutting between the scenes, of a pace that gets faster and faster. It's a great play and a great opportunity to see how it works as a thriller, really.
See me! See me! I will proclaim thee, Angelo. Sign me a present pardon for my brother, or with an outstretched throat I'll tell the world aloud what man thou art.
Who will believe thee, Isabel? My false, or ways your true?
To whom should I complain? Did I tell this? Who would believe me?
I suppose I thought, I mean, yeah, a lot. We were talking a lot about Me Too and about Harvey Weinstein, but I suppose I the more that we looked at it, the more I felt that this had to be a first. And I've seen Angelo played almost like he's a serial, like Weinstein. This is something that he's. I suppose I have to, is it legally careful with it? Is it? Can we say like Weinstein, or is that? I mean, it appears to be, very clearly appears to be. But I feel like he could become a serial rapist. But I feel like this is the first time that this particular emotion and power dynamic has taken hold. And I think which makes him utterly, I feel like he's abusive in the wielding of his power, but he's also quite bad at it. I feel like it's a kind of a strangely kind of cumbersome and weird pronouncement of love stroke lust, but as somebody that's so emotionally unintelligent that he's never been able to quite to work out the two things, because he never felt either of them, and suddenly he's feeling it while he's in the most powerful position he can possibly be in. And so I feel when he says to Isabella, plainly conceive I love you, I think he absolutely means it. And then when he says, but you know, if you show me love, then I won't kill your brother. Again, I'm not sure how aware he is of how horrendous he is being until it kind of unfolds and he starts lying and he starts covering his tracks and he starts trying to dig himself out of this hole and retain the face of a good Christian man, you know, to all intents and purposes. And I think that's where it becomes it's a horror show from the moment that he starts. I mean, really, from the moment he takes hold, he's not the right man to have that power. He's a weak man wielding a power that's not his.
So yes, obviously it's a very sensitive scene in the play. But we treated it very sensitively in the room. It's obviously, Sandy has to do or approach a scene that's difficult for him as much as it is for me. But Sandy and I have worked together before, so we have a really good working relationship, and we're able to sort of talk about it in great detail as sort of collaborative artists, rather than sort of it becoming too tricky for us. I mean, there's a lot of trust between us. It's a scene that needs a lot of trust between the performers to understand, you know, where each person's coming from. But we also, before the sort of moment where she is compromised, they're having a wonderful debate. So Sandy and I very much enjoyed unpicking the debate to see how it led well, at least him to think that's what they were talking about when she has no idea that's what they're talking about. But it's a painful moment each night when I approach it, whether you've had personal experience of that or not. If you have empathy for people who have been put in those positions, it's a painful to think about people that are placed in that position on a daily basis.
As far as I'm concerned, there's no condoning of his actions. But I was trying to find that, I guess there was two things that I thought in playing the part with Lucy was, it's a really weird one because you're as an actor, there's a responsibility to what you're meant to be doing in terms of playing the part. But you're also aware that within that role, we're trying to work out a way for dramatically to create as unpleasant a tension as we can without it being any without it taking it beyond the step whereby actually it is abuse being played out on stage, if you know what I mean. So it's trying to find a way that you can leave Isabella with that final speech that she has at the end of those two scenes, where her world is entirely spun on its head. That you're sort of trying to set in a sense, that's the end goal, is making sure that you get that vibration right by the end of those two scenes, that then launches the next section of the play. And once that's done, Angelo has a long time off stage, which is so you've kind of just got to come in, you make that hit, and then hope that reverberates, the tension sort of lasts. I mean, and then reverberates through. Because I think if we always feel on stage, sometimes it always hits in the roughly the same, but sometimes we can both feel that it absolutely is. We both come off feeling tangibly shocked by it, and sometimes it feels, it's in the right ballpark, but it's a weird thing to be chasing after. It's a strange atmosphere to actually actively be looking for, but to keep it respectful and you come off feeling a little nauseous when it works.
Gentle, my lord. Let me entreat you speak the former language.
Plainly conceive I love you.
As my brother did love Juliet. And you tell me he shall die for it.
He shall not, Isabel, if you give me love.
I know. Your virtue hath a license in which seems a little fouler than it is to pluck on others.
Believe me, on mine honour, my words express my purpose.
Little honour to be much believed, and most pernicious purpose. Seeming. I will proclaim thee, Angelo. Look for it. Sign me a present pardon for my brother, or with an outstretched throat I'll tell the world aloud what man thou art.
Who will believe thee, Isabel? My unsoiled name, the steerness of my life, my votes against you and my place of the state will sow your accusation overway, that you shall stifle in your own report and smell of calumny. I have begun, and now I give my sensual race the rein. Fit thy consent to my sharp appetite. Lay by all nicety and prolixious blushes that banish what they sue for. Redeem thy brother by yielding up thy body to my will, or else he must not only die the death, but thy unkindness shall his death draw out to lingering sufferance. answer me tomorrow, or by the affection that now guides me most, I'll prove a tyrant to him. As for you, say what you can. My false, always your true.
To whom should I complain? Did I tell this, who would believe me? Oh, perilous mouths that bear in them one and the self-same tongue, either of condemnation or reproof, bidding the law make curtsy to their will, hooking both right and wrong to their appetite, to follow as it draws. I'll to my brother, though he hath fallen by prompture of the blood, yet hath he in him such a mind of honour, that had he 20 heads to tender down on 20 bloody blocks, he'd yield them up before his sister should her body stoop to such abhorred pollution. Then, Isabel, live chaste, and brother, die. More than our brother is our chastity. I'll tell him yet of Angelo's request, and fit his mind to death for his soul's rest.
Oh my gosh, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I think it's a phenomenal performance.
Thought-provoking, shocking.
Brilliantly acted, beautifully staged, and I enjoyed every minute of it.
Oh, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. Yeah, I think it's a super production.
Deep, dark, it's very current. Amazing that it was written so long ago and yet applies to today.
It is the most important play of 2019. Incredible.